They said moving into this neighborhood would be a dream. Quiet streets, friendly faces, and a fresh start. But the dream shattered the moment the HOA decided my pickup truck was too much of an eyesore. At first, I thought it was just a warning, maybe even a mistake. But then came the fines, the threats, and the humiliating notes left on my door. What started as a simple parking dispute quickly turned into a full-blown war with people who thought they controlled everything. And what happened next left the entire neighborhood stunned. So the question is, how far would you go when someone tries to take away your freedom just because they can? When Alex and his family first moved into the neighborhood, they thought they'd finally found the perfect place to settle down. The streets were lined with tall oak trees that gave shade in the summer. Kids rode their bikes in cul-de-sacs without a care in the world, and every front yard seemed perfectly trimmed, as if pulled straight from a postcard. For a while, life felt almost too good to be true. Alex, a hard-working guy who'd spent years saving for his home, was proud of what he'd built. His weekends were often spent tinkering with his pickup truck in the driveway, a vehicle that wasn't just a mode of transportation, but a symbol of his independence and grit. To him, it wasn't about appearances. It was about practicality and pride. The neighbors waved politely, and for the most part, everyone seemed welcoming. But beneath the smiles and neatly kept lawns, there was something Alex didn't notice right away, a quiet current of control that flowed through the community. A set of rules drafted and enforced by people who believed they had the right to decide how everyone should live. At first, it was subtle. A neighbor mentioning almost casually how strict the HOA could be. A letter slipped into the mailbox reminding residents of community standards. Nothing alarming, nothing worth worrying about, until those words turned into warnings. And those warnings would soon put Alex's truck, his property, and even his sense of freedom at the center of a storm he never asked for. At first, Alex thought nothing of the letter taped to his door. It looked like another one of those standard HOA reminders. Keep your trash bins hidden, trim your hedges, the usual nitpicky things that neighbors grumbled about but ignored. But when he opened it, his stomach dropped. The letter wasn't about hedges or grass height. It was about his truck, the same truck he drove to work every morning, the one he used to haul groceries, help neighbors move furniture, and take his kids camping on weekends. According to the HOA, his truck was a violation of community standards because it didn't fit the aesthetic image they wanted to maintain. At first, Alex laughed. How could a truck, clean, well-maintained, and parked neatly in his own driveway, be a problem? He assumed it was a mistake, a clerical error, something that could be cleared up with a simple phone call. But when he reached out to the HOA board, the tone he got wasn't apologetic. It was icy. They told him flatly trucks weren't allowed to be permanently visible in the neighborhood. Either he hid it in the garage, parked it elsewhere, or faced daily fines. Alex tried to reason with him. His garage was too small to fit the truck, and parking it outside the neighborhood wasn't realistic. But the board didn't care. They cited bylaws, section numbers, and community image standards like they were gospel. Just like that, Alex realized this wasn't going to be a misunderstanding. It was going to be a battle. The fines started small, $25 here, $50 there, but they added up quickly. Within 2 weeks, the HOA claimed he owed nearly $500. Each notice came with a harsher tone, each one threatening legal action if he didn't comply. That's when the harassment began. Neighbors who once waved politely now whispered as he drove by. Anonymous complaints were filed against him, alleging noise violations, unauthorized modifications to his property, even accusations of leaving trash cans out too long. Alex knew none of it was true, but the HOA treated every complaint as fact. The breaking point came one Saturday morning. Alex was in his driveway, polishing the truck's hood, when an HOA board member, Janet, a woman in her late 50s with sharp features and a reputation for running the community like her personal kingdom, marched up the sidewalk. She didn't smile. She didn't greet him. She pointed directly at the truck and said, "This has to go. Today." Her tone wasn't a suggestion. It was a command.
And when Alex calmly told her he wasn't breaking any laws, Janet leaned in and whispered words that made his blood run cold. "If you think you can win against us, you're wrong. We always win." From that moment on, everything escalated. Letters turned into certified warnings. Fines turned into threats of liens against his home. And suddenly, Alex's fight over a truck became something bigger. It became a fight for his property, his rights, and his family's peace of mind. But Alex wasn't the type to back down. He started documenting everything, every letter, every fine, every ridiculous accusation. He even bought a small camera to catch HOA members snooping near his property late at night. And sure enough, within days, he caught one, an HOA officer taking photos of his driveway from the shadows. When he confronted the board with the footage, they brushed it off, saying they had every right to ensure compliance. But Alex knew it wasn't about rules anymore. It was about power. They wanted to make an example out of him, to scare every other homeowner into silence. That's when he discovered he wasn't alone. One evening, while taking his kids for a walk, a neighbor quietly approached him. She explained that years earlier, her husband had faced the same treatment. Different issue, same tactics. They fined him into submission, drained his savings, and nearly forced him to sell. She lowered her voice and said, "They want people to fear them. That's how they keep control." Hearing that lit a fire in Alex. If the HOA had bullied others before, maybe he was the one who could finally stand up to him. But how? The answer came in the form of a single letter, the most aggressive one yet. This time, the HOA threatened legal action. They weren't just going after his wallet, they were going after his home. According to them, if he didn't pay up and comply, they could place a lien on his property. It was a chilling moment. The truck wasn't just a truck anymore. It was a weapon the HOA was using to try to strip him of everything he'd worked for. But Alex wasn't going down without a fight. He sought legal advice. The attorney he spoke with explained something shocking. While HOAs had power, their rules weren't absolute. Many of their so-called bylaws could be challenged, especially if they were vague, discriminatory, or enforced inconsistently. And the truck rule? It was all of the above. That revelation gave Alex hope, but it also raised the stakes, because now he had to make a choice. Quietly pay the fines and hope the HOA moved on, or fight them head on, risking everything in the process. For days, Alex wrestled with the decision. His wife worried about the stress, about the mounting threats, about what would happen if they lost. His kids asked why people were being so mean about Dad's truck, and Alex himself felt the weight of every possible outcome. Finally, he made up his mind. He wasn't just fighting for his truck. He was fighting for his home, his family, and every neighbor too scared to speak up. He was going to take the HOA to court. But as Alex prepared his case, gathering documents, photographs, and testimony, the HOA wasn't slowing down. They doubled down on their campaign, sending out newsletters painting him as non-compliant and disruptive. Some neighbors began avoiding eye contact altogether, scared of being associated with him. Others quietly nodded in support when no one else was watching. And then, just when Alex thought things couldn't get worse, he came home one evening to find a bright orange notice nailed to his front door. In bold letters it read, "Final warning, failure to remove vehicle will result in legal action." It was the loudest, most public humiliation yet, a scarlet letter for the entire neighborhood to see. His kids asked if they were going to lose their home. His wife broke down in tears at the kitchen table. And Alex, he stood there staring at the notice, his jaw tight, his fists clenched, knowing one thing for certain. The fight was only beginning.
The day of the HOA hearing arrived like a storm. Alex had barely slept. The entire week had been building toward this moment, a closed-door board meeting where they claimed his fate as a homeowner would be decided. He knew they wanted one thing, total compliance. They wanted him broken, apologetic, willing to pay whatever fine they demanded. But Alex wasn't walking in alone anymore. His attorney, a sharp but calm man named Harris, walked beside him. Harris carried a thick folder of documents, photographs, bylaws, legal codes, and evidence of selective enforcement. And for the first time since this nightmare began, Alex felt a surge of confidence. This wasn't just about a truck. It was about proving the HOA had gone too far. Inside the meeting room, the board sat in a semicircle, faces cold and unreadable. Janet,
the self-appointed queen of the neighborhood, sat at the center like a judge presiding over a trial. She adjusted her glasses and said in a clipped tone, "Mr. Johnson, you are here today because of repeated violations of community standards. Your refusal to comply has left this board with no choice but to consider escalated measures." Her voice dripped with smug authority. She thought she had already won. Alex clenched his fists under the table, but Harris leaned forward, calm and steady. "Before we go any further, I'd like to state for the record that Mr. Johnson disputes the validity of these so-called violations. Furthermore, this board has failed to apply its own bylaws consistently, and we have evidence to prove it." The board members shifted uncomfortably. Janet's smile faltered for the first time. Harris slid a photo across the table. It showed another neighbor's large van, parked openly in their driveway, untouched by fines or warnings. Another photo, an SUV with commercial decals, in plain sight, yet never sighted. And another, a boat, parked for weeks without consequence. Alex's heart pounded as the images stacked up. Harris's voice cut through the silence. "This is selective enforcement. You've singled out Mr. Johnson while ignoring numerous similar vehicles. That is not only unfair, it is illegal." Janet's jaw tightened. She tried to brush it off, insisting those cases were different or temporary. But Harris wasn't finished. He pulled out another document, this one a copy of the HOA's own bylaws. According to Section 12, subsection C, the rules regarding vehicle storage apply only to commercial vehicles with visible signage or oversized dimensions that obstruct community safety or access. Mr. Johnson's truck meets neither criteria. It is not oversized and it bears no signage. By your own bylaws, this is not a violation. The board members exchanged uneasy glances. Janet's composure was cracking, but she still tried to maintain control. "This is about the character of our community. We can't allow certain appearances to degrade property values." And that's when Harris delivered the blow that changed everything. "Let the record show that the board has admitted its decision is based on appearances, not on the actual written bylaws. That's called arbitrary enforcement. And that opens this HOA to liability. If you continue down this path, we will take this case to court. And when we do, we won't just be asking for relief. We'll be seeking damages, legal fees, and a full investigation into this board's practices." The room went silent. Dead silent. Alex could feel the shift in power, like the ground itself had tilted. For weeks, he had been the one under fire, mocked, fined, threatened, harassed. But now, in this moment, the board was on defense. Janet's face flushed red, her lips pressed into a thin, trembling line. She opened her mouth to speak, but the words caught in her throat. Finally, she sputtered, "You think you've won? This neighborhood doesn't want your truck. We don't want you undermining the standards we've worked so hard to build. You're a troublemaker, Mr. Johnson, and you don't belong here." The words hung in the air, dripping with venom. But in that instant, Janet had made her biggest mistake. She had revealed the truth. The HOA's war against Alex wasn't about rules. It was personal, arbitrary, biased. And every board member knew it. One of the quieter members, a man who had barely spoken during the hearing, cleared his throat. "I move that we dismiss all violations against Mr. Johnson, immediately." Another member hesitated, then nodded. "Seconded!" Janet whipped her head around, furious. "You can't—" But she could feel the tide turning against her. The vote passed, 3-2, right in front of her. Just like that, Alex's fines were gone, his record cleared, his truck was no longer a violation. Alex exhaled, his whole body trembling with adrenaline. For the first time in months, the weight pressing on his chest began to lift. He had won. He had actually beaten the HOA. But as he gathered his papers and stood to leave, Janet leaned across the table,
her voice low and venomous. "This isn't over, Mr. Johnson. You may think you've won, but you have no idea what we're capable of." Her eyes burned with rage, her voice shook with spite. And in that chilling moment, Alex realized something. Yes, he had won the battle, but the war might not be over. He left the meeting with his head held high, his truck safe, and his rights intact. But as the boardroom door closed behind him, he couldn't shake the feeling that Janet's words weren't just empty threats. Because sometimes victory comes with a price, and sometimes the most dangerous enemy is the one who refuses to accept defeat.
The very next morning, word began to spread. Homeowners who had quietly endured their own HOA headaches, threatening letters over garden gnomes, fines for leaving trash cans out too long, warnings for children's bikes left near the sidewalk, suddenly saw Alex's case as a beacon. He wasn't just one man standing up to the board. He had cracked the veneer of their authority. Neighbors who once avoided Alex, fearing guilt by association, started stopping by his driveway. Some came to thank him. Others came to share their own stories. One elderly couple revealed they'd been fined hundreds of dollars for planting roses that weren't on the approved color list. Another family had been threatened with legal action for a backyard treehouse. All of them had kept silent, too afraid to fight back. Now, they weren't afraid anymore. And slowly, the narrative in the neighborhood began to shift. Janet, once seen as the unshakable enforcer of community standards, now looked vulnerable, overreaching, exposed. For the first time, her power cracked, not because Alex yelled louder, but because he had used the HOA's own rules against them. But Janet wasn't about to go quietly. She doubled down. If she couldn't break Alex with fines, she would try another way. She launched whisper campaigns, accusing him of being trouble for the community. Anonymous notes appeared in his mailbox, calling him selfish, saying he didn't respect the neighborhood's image. Small acts of sabotage began, his trash cans mysteriously knocked over, HOA notices left in his yard like calling cards. And through it all, Alex stood firm. He didn't fight back with the same pettiness. He documented every note, every incident, every small injustice. Because he had learned the most important lesson of this battle. When you shine a light on corruption, you never stop documenting. Meanwhile, Harris, his attorney, followed up with the board. He sent letters reminding them of their vote, warning them of the consequences of retaliation, and urging them to review their enforcement policies. He knew what Alex now knew. Janet was not just a neighbor with too much free time. She was a liability waiting to explode. The tension simmered for weeks. Then came the breaking point. At the next annual HOA meeting, open to all residents, dozens of homeowners showed up, more than ever before. Many had never attended a meeting, assuming their voice didn't matter. But this time, things were different. Alex's case had awakened something. People wanted answers. The board sat at the front, faces tight with nerves. Janet tried to keep control, rattling off the agenda like nothing had changed. But the residents weren't there to listen. They were there to confront. One by one, homeowners stood up and shared their experiences, stories of unfair fines, harassment, intimidation. The room grew heavier with each testimony. The board members squirmed. Janet tried to silence them, but the tide had already turned. Then a neighbor stood and said what everyone was thinking. "We didn't elect this board to bully us. We elected you to serve us. And if you can't do that, then maybe it's time for a new board." The room erupted in applause. For the first time, Janet's mask of control completely shattered. Within weeks, a recall petition circulated. Signatures piled up, and at the next vote, The community made its choice clear. Janet was out. The fallout for her was brutal. Years of ruling with fear and pettiness evaporated in a single moment of public rejection. She disappeared from community life, retreating into her home, rarely seen except for the occasional bitter glare as Alex drove past in his pickup truck. But for Alex, though, life slowly returned to normal. He parked his truck in the driveway each night without fear. He enjoyed barbecues with neighbors who once kept their distance. He saw kids riding bikes again, gardens blooming with colors outside the approved list, and families daring to live freely on their own property. But more than that, Alex felt something deeper. He realized his fight wasn't just about one truck or one rule or even Janet herself. It was about standing up to injustice, no matter how small it looks on paper. Because small abuses of power, left unchecked, grow into bigger ones. And sometimes it only takes one person refusing to be bowed to make an entire community rise. Months later, Alex reflected on it all. The sleepless nights, the endless stress, the moments he thought of giving in just to make it stop. And he realized if he had given up, Janet would still be ruling unchecked. His neighbors would still be living in fear of petty letters and arbitrary fines. Instead, his battle had sparked change. And as he looked at his truck, muddy from a weekend camping trip, sitting proudly in the driveway, he couldn't help but smile. It wasn't just a vehicle. It was a symbol. A reminder that no matter how powerful or petty an HOA thinks it is, it only holds as much power as the people allow it to. The story of Alex versus Janet became neighborhood lore. New residents heard it within weeks of moving in, a cautionary tale about what happens when authority goes too far, and what happens when someone dares to fight back. Some laughed at the absurdity. Others shook their heads in disbelief. But everyone remembered the lesson. Because in the end, it wasn't just about a truck. It was about freedom. It was about dignity. And it was about one simple truth that echoes far beyond one neighborhood, one HOA, or one conflict. The moment you stand up to bullies, no matter their title, no matter their position, you strip away their greatest weapon, fear. And that's the real victory.
If you enjoyed seeing Justice Served, make sure you hit subscribe, because the next HOA nightmare might just be wilder than this one. Don't miss it.